Have you ever felt something inside you begin to stir for no apparent reason, as if a silent, deep, and persistent voice were whispering to you that there's more to life than you've known until now? This isn't a logical thought or a passing emotion. It's a calling, an ancient, mysterious calling that springs from the soul and awakens when its time comes. This call isn't random. It's a sign that you are beginning one of the most sacred and transformative journeys a human being can undertake. A spiritual awakening, not a superficial awakening of ideas or beliefs, but one that shakes the foundations of your identity, that tears you away from illusions and invites you to see reality through completely new eyes. And although each awakening is unique, like an unrepeatable energetic imprint, there are common stages that most seekers go through. These stages are like thresholds that mark the passage from an old version of yourself to a more authentic, free and connected version of yourself with the divine. In this video, we will walk through the 5 stages of spiritual awakening together, not as a rigid map, but as a living guide that will allow you to understand where you are on your journey and where you are heading, from the initial chaos that shake your world to the serene clarity of the grounded soul. Each stage has its purpose, its power, and its mystery. This will not be a simple, informative review. It will be a deep, symbolic, and energetic exploration of the transformation process that all conscious beings are destined to live. I invite you to listen with an open heart, to allow yourself to feel what resonates, and, above all, to remember that you are not alone, because if you are watching this video, it is very likely that your soul has already begun to awaken, and this may be one of the clearest signs that your transformation is already underway. Spiritual awakening is not a modern invention or a passing fad of personal growth. It is an ancient process recorded in the hidden pages of sacred texts, guarded in forgotten temples, and passed down orally in mystery schools since time immemorial. What we call the stages of awakening today were known in ancient times as the initiatory degrees of the soul. In ancient Egypt, the priests of the Temple of Isis and Horus guided initiates through symbolic processes of spiritual death and rebirth. These were not theatrical rituals, but authentic trials of the soul. The neophyte had to traverse the internal chaos, the abyss of ignorance, to finally find the light of wisdom and union with the whole. This path was represented by the 12 portals of transformation, each corresponding to a higher level of consciousness. In Hindu traditions, awakening was understood as the process of Kundalini, the dormant serpentine energy at the base of the spine that, as it ascends through the chakras, awakens spiritual perception and expands consciousness until reaching samadhi or enlightenment. This energetic ascension has its own stages, its own challenges, its own revelations. Buddhism is no stranger to this concept either. Before becoming Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama went through multiple internal phases: renunciation, doubt, struggle with the ego, enlightenment under the fig tree, and finally, selfless service to the world. His followers understood that every authentic spiritual awakening involves rupture, clarity, and transformation. The mystical texts of Gnostic Christianity speak of the knowledge of the heart and the ladder of the soul. Awakening is not merely a belief or a conversion, but a conscious ascent toward the realm of the inner heavens. That place Jesus pointed to when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." In the Gospel of Thomas, Christ is presented not as an external savior, but as an internal divine spark that must be ignited. Neoplatonist philosophers, like Plotinus, taught that the soul descended into the physical world to learn, forget, and ultimately remember its divine nature through a process they called anamnesis, sacred remembrance. This process, step by step, stage by stage, was the soul's return to the original source, the One. Even among indigenous peoples, the concept of awakening was present. In many shamanic cultures, awakening began with a call from the spirit, a crisis, or illness that marked the beginning of transformation. Those who responded to this call had to undergo symbolic trials, fasting, visions, isolation, and ego death, until they were reborn as healers, guides, or visionaries. These traditions, separated by time and geography, shared a profound intuition. Spiritual awakening is not an event, it's a journey. It's not a moment of sudden enlightenment, but a path of profound transformation, often painful, always sacred. And that path is marked by stages, by cycles, by transitions that take us from darkness to light, from confusion to clarity, from the small self to the infinite being. Today, in this hyper-connected yet spiritually hungry world, souls continue to awaken. And although we no longer kneel before sphinxes or meditate in caves, the process is the same. The 5 stages of awakening we'll explore below are rooted in this ancient wisdom. They are doors to yourself, echoes of a knowledge your soul already knows and has come to remember. Spiritual awakening is essentially a return, not to something new, but to the eternal. It is the process by which the soul, asleep in the illusion of the material world, begins to remember its divine origin. And although each path is unique, there are universal stages that mark this sacred journey. Stages that are not mere concepts, but inner doors that open one after another at the rhythm of our evolution. In this first part, we will explore the first 3 stages of spiritual awakening, those that act as the crucible where the soul begins to transform. Some are painful, others revealing, but all are necessary. First, the dark night of the soul. This stage, often unwanted but absolutely essential, is the turning point. It's the moment when the old self begins to crumble. Everything you thought you were, your identity, your goals, your beliefs, your relationships, begins to lose meaning. You may feel empty, lost, even disconnected from everything that once gave you security. Christian mystics like St. John of the Cross describe this moment as the dark night of the soul, a passage of desolation that paradoxically prepares the ground for light. In this phase, the soul enters a state of deep introspection. The ego struggles to maintain control, but something deeper has already awakened. The most common symptoms are existential crises, spiritual anxiety, a sense of emptiness, loss of purpose, and emotional isolation. But this chaos is not punishment. It is the alchemical fire that initiates purification. It's the moment when the caterpillar begins to dissolve, unaware that it's destined to fly. Second, the inner call. After the initial collapse, something new begins to germinate. It's faint at first, like a weak but persistent spark. It's the call, a subtle, insistent feeling that there is something more, something beyond the visible, beyond the everyday world. You begin to question everything. Who am I really? Why am I here? What does it all mean? You are drawn to spiritual themes, ancient philosophies, symbols, and mysteries. You feel an almost magnetic pull towards self-knowledge. This stage resembles the first awakening in many esoteric traditions. It's when the soul begins to remember. There's no clarity yet, but there's thirst, a thirst for truth, an intuition that there's a deeper reality waiting to be discovered. This is where the conscious search begins. You read books you previously ignored. You feel drawn to practices like meditation, yoga, tarot, astrology, and shamanism, not as a fad, but as tools to awaken something dormant within you. Some common symptoms include constant synchronicities, symbolic dreams, a desire to withdraw from superficial environments, and a sense of connection with something invisible. Third, the expansion of consciousness. At this stage, what were once mere intuitions become direct experiences. You begin to perceive reality differently. What was once rigid becomes fluid. What once seemed separate is revealed to be interconnected. Your consciousness expands. You begin to understand that you are more than a body, more than a personal story. You realize that you are part of something much larger. The individual self begins to dissolve into the cosmic we. You may experience moments of profound peace, of oneness with all. Sometimes they are brief, but they leave an indelible mark. Duality begins to crumble. Judgment is replaced by compassion, guilt by acceptance, fear by presence. In many traditions, this phase is seen as the birth of the higher self, the moment when the soul takes the reins and begins to guide you from a higher perspective. These are the most common symptoms: heightened empathy, energetic activation, a sense of connection with nature, mystical or transcendental experiences, and moments of clarity without logical explanation. These three stages, the fall, the call, and the expansion, make up the first great cycle of awakening. They are like the first three steps of the initiate, who crosses the threshold of the inner temple. They are not easy, but they are deeply sacred, because each one breaks a veil, reveals a truth, and brings you closer to who you truly are. In the next section, we will explore the final two stages of the process, those in which you not only awaken, but begin to live from that new consciousness. By now, the soul has crossed the thresholds of pain, longing, and expansion. You have begun to remember who you are and have glimpsed reality beyond the veil of illusion. But the journey of spiritual awakening does not culminate in a fleeting experience of unity. What comes next is even more sacred and challenging: to become what you have remembered, to embody the light, to live awake. In this section, we'll explore the two final stages of spiritual awakening: integration and conscious mastery. These are phases that transform not only your perception, but also the way you walk through the world. Here it's no longer about seeking more, but about being, about sustaining the soul's frequency amidst the noise of life. Fourth, integration, awakening made alive. After the revelations comes the time of integration. This stage is often less spectacular, but more crucial than the previous ones. You have had visions, profound insights, perhaps mystical experiences, but now you must bring all of that back to earth. Spiritual integration is the art of harmonizing your new understandings with your daily life. This is where many stumble. They want to remain in ecstasy, but true spirituality is proven in the simple, in the everyday, in how you respond to chaos, how you manage your relationships, how you act when no one is watching. You begin to purify your life, letting go of what no longer resonates with you. Habits, people, jobs, environments, not from judgment, but from discernment. It's not a stage of painful renunciation, but of conscious refinement. You are sculpting your reality from the new consciousness you have awakened. A profound need for authenticity also emerges. You can no longer maintain masks. You want to live in total coherence. What you think, what you feel, what you do, everything must vibrate at the same frequency. This is where spirituality ceases to be a theory and becomes a way of being in the world. Here are some common symptoms: a search for internal coherence, radical lifestyle changes, more aligned relationships, a need for service or purpose, and periods of inner silence. This is a long cyclical stage, like a spiral that deepens with each turn. It never ends because there's always more to integrate, but each layer that aligns makes you freer, lighter, truer. Fifth, conscious mastery, being at the service of the whole. The final stage of awakening is not retreat, isolation, or perfection. It is conscious presence in the world, with your feet on the ground and your soul in the sky. It is being a living bridge between dimensions. At this stage, you're no longer seeking, not because you know everything, but because you have already found within yourself the source that contains everything. You have moved from the identity of the seeker to that of the light-bearer. This mastery is not arrogance or egoic enlightenment, it is active humility. You know that everything is constantly changing, but you no longer resist. You flow, you serve, you radiate. You are a guide without imposing, a teacher without disciples, a beacon that doesn't need convincing. You simply shine, and your presence transforms. At this point, your energy begins to naturally impact others. You attract those who are ready. Your words, silences, and actions begin to become medicine, not because you prepare them, but because you are a channel for something greater. This is the stage of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, of the realized person in Vedanta, of the Christ incarnated in Gnosis. This is not someone separate from the world, but a fully present being who walks among others like someone carrying a burning torch. These are the most common symptoms: deep inner peace, detachment without coldness, constant inspiration, attraction to seekers, the ability to sustain elevated energetic spaces. But this stage, like all others, is not a fixed destination, not the summit of a mountain, but the opening of a new cycle. Because the true master remains a student of the mystery, and as long as he breathes, he will continue to fine-tune his vibration, serving in silence, remembering at every moment that the path has no end, only depth. Through these 5 stages, the soul awakens, purifies, expands, aligns, and finally becomes who it truly is. There is no turning back, no more masks. Only the presence of the self living from the highest truth. Understanding the stages of spiritual awakening is a powerful revelation. But that understanding only transforms into wisdom when we apply it. Enlightenment doesn't happen in a hidden temple or on a mountaintop. It happens in everyday life, in traffic, in awkward conversations, in the silence of dawn, and in the decisions we make when no one is looking. Here, you'll learn how to recognize which stage you're in and how to consciously integrate each of them into your life. Because beyond mysticism, awakening is a profoundly human act. One thing, if you're in the dark night of the soul, this stage is a radical purification. Don't fight the darkness. Observe it, listen to it, talk to it, ask it what it came to show you. The most important thing here is to allow yourself to feel without judgment. Write down what you're going through. Don't isolate yourself completely, but lovingly select who you share this process with. Practice detachment not from rejection, but from understanding. Let go of what no longer resonates with you. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. Remember, you're not falling, you're being reseeded. Create a shadow journal. Write down every day what hurts, what confuses you, and what you sense they're doing. 2, if you're feeling the inner calling, this is the time to open yourself to the mystery without needing absolute answers. Read, research, explore different traditions. But beyond external knowledge, begin to listen to your inner wisdom. That's the true master. Increase your connection with nature. Listen to your body. Experiment without rigidity. Try meditation, visualizations, mindful walking, prayer. The soul will speak in the language you are willing to receive. A useful practice is to create an altar of awakening. You don't need expensive objects, just symbols that represent your intention to reconnect with the sacred. 3rd, if you're in the expansion of consciousness, you're beginning to feel part of something bigger. Your emotions become more subtle, your thoughts expand. It's a time of attunement to the invisible. The key at this stage is not to rush. The mind will want to rationalize what you're experiencing, but the soul whispers more than it screams. Watch your words, your actions, your decisions, not because you must be perfect, but because you now know that everything has a resonance. Choose from presence. Honor your energy. Practice conscious silence. Dedicate 10 minutes a day to sit in silence. Without expectations, just presence. The soul is strengthened by simplicity. 4, if you're integrating everything you've learned, this is when the real alchemy begins. You no longer need to escape to the woods to feel spiritual. You can be in a chaotic city and still vibrate high. But the temptation to regress also appears. People, places, or patterns that try to drag you back to previous versions of yourself. Don't fight them. Be grateful for them and choose anew. This is a time to establish new structures, nutrition, rest, relationships, and habits, not as an imposition, but as an act of love for your reborn self. Create a sacred routine, a conscious morning or evening where you meditate, give thanks, cleanse your energy, and affirm your path. 5th, if you are in conscious mastery, you have stopped seeking and begun living from the truth. You are not a beacon to impress, but to illuminate. You are of service. Here the ego dissolves even further, and each day becomes an act of surrender. But this stage requires great humility. The true master continues to learn, continues to fall, continues to refine his soul. Here the work doesn't end, it deepens. Seek to serve without losing yourself, to accompany without absorbing, to guide without depending. This is the subtle art of living with your feet on the ground and your soul in the sky. Practice silent service. Do something for someone every day without expecting recognition. True power is cultivated in the anonymity of the soul. So the question is, how do you know what stage you're in? The answer lies in your body, in your emotions, in your dreams. No stage is better than another. There's no linear path. Sometimes you may inhabit two or more phases at once, or return to a previous one to heal something unfinished. The important thing is to recognize them, honor them, and walk with honesty. This is not a journey outward. It is a deep descent into the temple of your soul. Now that you have gone through the 5 stages of spiritual awakening, you may understand a profound truth. There is no final destination, only constant expansion. Awakening is not a goal. It is a way of life. It is the sacred decision to live with the eyes of your soul open, even when the world seems asleep. This journey is not linear. It's not about climbing a ladder to perfection, but rather traversing concentric circles toward the center of your being again and again, with more truth, more depth, and more compassion. Perhaps today you're in the dark night and feel like everything's falling apart. Perhaps you've just heard the call and don't know where to start. Or perhaps you're integrating years of inner work without the need for labels or approval. No matter where you are, if you're walking toward yourself, you're already on the right path. Awakening isn't a one-time event. It's a daily decision. It's asking yourself every morning, where do I want to live today? From fear or from love? From conditioning or from my essence? And every time you choose your soul, even in the smallest way, you are contributing not only to your evolution, but to everyone's. Because when a human being awakens even a little, all of humanity is illuminated with them. This video isn't meant to give you all the answers. It's meant to remind you that you already have them within you. That every stage you go through is part of a divine plan designed by your own higher consciousness to help you remember who you truly are. So when you doubt, when you fall, when you forget, return to this map, not as something rigid, but as a mirror that reflects back your highest reflection. And remember, no awakening is too small, no shadow too large. Everything you experience, if you move through it with presence, brings you closer to the truth. And now I invite you to join this channel of awakened souls. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to continue exploring esoteric wisdom and the mysteries of the soul. Like if you felt something awakened within you, and share this video with those you know who are ready to remember who they are. Because this awakening doesn't happen in solitude. It happens in a tribe. It happens in a network. It happens with love. And you, traveler of the spirit, in which of these stages are you?